Hello and welcome to Nourish Your Biblical Roots, special edition. I'm Bishop Paul Lanier, chairman of the board of directors for the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And I'll be your host for today's podcast. We're broadcasting from NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. And during our time together, we'll be talking with special guests about a variety of topics, especially as they relate to Israel, Jewish-Christian relations, and the work of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Today, I have the extreme honor of speaking to a remarkable woman who's been through so much and overcome so much, and we're thrilled to welcome her here today, Irina, who the fellowship helped escape the horrors of the war in her own country and begin a new life in Israel with her 4 children and her mother. Irina, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us on this broadcast. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your miraculous story. Let me just tell you, back in March of 22, now the fellowship didn't just show up to this Ukrainian crisis, but Yael was actually there a week before it all hit. And even before that, her father had been a present ministry hub in Ukraine for more than 3 decades. So when everything hit the fan and the violence began, the fellowship was already there with boots on the ground, ready to help. And in March of 22, Yael said, "Can you come to Israel? Because I want you to go to Moldova." And of course, I said, absolutely. So I arrived in Israel, took a flight to Moldova, and I got to tell you what moved me first. This was my first impression of all of it. Later on, in December, I was in Odessa, and then last week just returned from Kyiv. But when I was in Moldova, I was just sitting in the car and we were driving along, and all of a sudden I looked out the window and maybe 100 yards, maybe 200 yards, I see this long line of vehicles that had been abandoned, and young women were walking on the road, and they were pulling a stroller or a suitcase with the hand of a child, maybe holding a little boy, little girl in their arms, walking alone. There were no fathers. There were no young men, because they had been forced to remain back in Ukraine to fight in the war. And I will never, and as they were arriving there at that little hub, forgive me, but this is the way it was for me. There was a railroad track and all of that apparatus, and I watched and I looked and I said to myself, if we could somehow change this to black and white instead of all the colors, it would look like we were in the war, World War II. And watching these precious mothers and their small children, of course, the fellowship was there and we began the process. But before I even begin there, first of all, I want to say thank you for being a part of this morning's podcast. And I just want you to know how grateful we are that you're a part of this moment. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bishop. It's my pleasure to be here.
I want to ask you some questions because trying to narrow it down is because not only were you present in the time of a war breaking out and then needing to take 4 children and your mother had suffered an embolism, a brain bleed. And not only were you dealing with 4 children who at that time, I think were aged like from 7 to 14 or 15-ish in there somewhere, 4 children, a mother whose health was very fragile, but you yourself, you were then in, I think about treatment 13 maybe for cancer. So I'm just in awe of you because of what you overcame and still overcoming. Tell me, can I ask you one question to begin this? When did you know? You know, there's that one moment, everything's happening and there's the treatments and you hear about the bombs and the bullets and the school closed, all of that stuff. When was that moment when you looked at your mother and you looked at your children and said, now we have to leave? When was that for you, and how did you get there, and how did they process that?
I should tell that I guess every Ukrainian remember and will remember that morning. And unfortunately, so happened that I was far from my children that morning. We live outside Kiev, and that certain day, on 24th of February, I had to have my 13th cancer injection in the city. So the day before, I took my children, oldest one. I brought my son to his father. We are divorced, but he also cares about children. I brought my son to his father. I took my older daughter and brought her to campus in Kiev for continue her studying. And that night I spent in Kiev, and my smallest children were outside in our private house, about 35 kilometers far from Kiev, with my mother. Normally, I do not leave them alone because of my mother physical limitation, let's say. But that night, once a month, when I leave for this cancer injection, I leave them alone. So happened that it was that night, and early in the morning, then I waked up from my alarm. I gave a call to my mother, asking her to prepare children to go to school. And she said, Ira, I prefer to leave them at home because I heard it wasn't like a bombing, but something happened. And she said, no, I would prefer them to stay home. And at that very moment, I understood that the war started. She didn't know this. I didn't tell her anything because I realized that they should feel comfortable at that moment. I need time to get home. So I just asked, okay, stay at home, don't go anywhere, wait for me. And my target was to collect all children together, to be all together, for them to feel comfortable that they are with me. The next moment, I received a call from my daughter, and she said, Mom, the war started. What we will do? I said, wait for me. I will come to pick up you. We should get home. But because of the war, she said, nobody will let me leave the campus alone. You should come to me. And I realized Kiev is a big city. Fortunately, it's not so far, but still it's time. I quickly get to the car, and I didn't start to move, but I remember that somebody knocked my window, and the man said, what are you doing? Where are you going? It's a traffic jam everywhere. You will not be able to move. I couldn't understand him because the street was empty. I didn't see people on the street. I started to move, and in 2 kilometers, I had to stop and leave my car because I couldn't move anywhere. City was blocked absolutely, and the main way out of the city was blocked. Cars didn't.
Are you saying that you left your car there? Did you go back and get it at all?
I just closed it, locked the car on the street, and left it on the street because I had to get to my daughter. And after that, I continued to work. In 1 hour, I get here, and I said, "You're taking only documents with you, nothing else."
Wow.
I took her, and I said, "Okay, now we go back to our car, and we have to find a way how to get out of the city." But when we came back, the car was parked very close to the main avenue of it out from the city. And at that moment, it also was blocked. Cars didn't move at all. And I said, we can't get home because we will just spend gasoline, energy, but we will not move at all. So let's wait till night, stay in Kiev in our apartment. But after that, I realized that I have to make my next injection to have this room for the next one. I did it every 21 days, and I proposed, okay, I will leave you with my friends and we'll go to the hospital. She refused. She said, I am with you. I said, okay, if we can't go home, I should do this injection. Fortunately, underground worked at that moment. Early in the moment, it still worked. And we managed to get to the hospital. But the picture was terrible because all people were leaving the building.
Yes.
Their staff, moms with the children, everybody. It's a cancer hospital, and everybody was leaving. So it means they didn't know what to do with them. They tried to be prepared to help soldiers. So they let people go.
Soon you became part of that long entourage of vehicles arriving in Moldova.
Yes.
To listen to you when you said that, I received a call from my daughter and said, Mom, the war's begun. I don't know how a mother or father can hear. You'll never forget that phone call.
No, you never forget it, because I didn't hear bombing, frankly speaking. So, but I heard it from my mother that something wrong. She felt it, and I heard it from my daughter. And you're just trying to realize the situation and what you can do, how you can manage it, you can get everybody together, and after that you can make any decisions.
Now
because
I'm reminding myself that you're doing all of this from a weakened condition physically. So I'm thinking about Moldova. When we were in Moldova and people were arriving, these young mothers were arriving with their children, one of the first things the fellowship did was to place them in vans and to then locate to what I would call mattress cities. There were about 13 of them. They had been tennis courts.
I saw it. I was there.
And so there was literally nothing on the floor but mattresses, and people living there for 2 or 3 days. Were you in one of those places?
Yes.
Yes. And then the next day we would move them to, it was a camp. I hate that word, but it was a beautiful camp. Someone from JDC owned it, I think. And it was like 4 or 5 stories. And I went up in there and interviewed and talked to a lot of precious people. There were some older men and women, and sat and had dinner with them. And then the next day, go to the government building. And thankfully, the state of Israel had addressed the immigration requirements and reduced them some to where you could at least get to Israel, and then we'll deal with the paperwork. So you were going through all of that, having just suffered your latest infusion or treatment and your mother's health and 4 children. That's amazing.
It was a new reality for us, unfortunately. But before do this step, we had to gather all the family at home.
Wow.
Everybody was in different places, and we didn't know what to do. So I did my injections, and afterward we discovered that underground is closed. Because the city was blocked and military cars couldn't move. We blocked underground to have this way, I think so, to transport some doctors or whatever they needed for the military purposes. So
let me ask you now, because people are wanting to know, how are you now physically? Irina, how is your health?
I'm much better.
Praise God. Baruch Hashem.
One result of researchers, and everything is clean. That's why I think that this first year in Israel, I managed to stabilize our life here. And now I say to everybody, we are ready to move forward.
How is your mother?
She's still limited in speech and physical activity, but she feels much better, and she looks much better because all of us were in a huge stress.
Yes.
Living.
I remember the plane, the Aliyah flight from Moldova. It was the strangest. You'll recall when you arrive at the airport, at the time they had a no-fly zone.
Yes.
The airport, so there weren't, and yet you still walked into the airport with maybe 100 people going to make Aliyah, and maybe hear the strange music of the airport and some of the announcements of, and there's no one behind the counters. There's no one checking luggage. There's no crowd. They had simply made the provision that Jews going home to Israel would be allowed to take that flight. What was that like for you to get on that plane? Had you ever been to Israel before?
Yes, I've been to Israel before, about 25 years ago, for a few times, because my father used to live here. Unfortunately, he died. But before I visited Israel, that's why I realized that I have a right to immigrate to Israel. And I had a chance to finalize my treatment. It was very important for me.
Yes.
From another side, it was a way to take children out of the war. But the most difficult for us, because our family is big, 6 people, was to find a way how to get out. Not just to take a decision to leave, to find a way. I can tell a few words about this, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Because at that moment, there were only a few options to get out. First of it was by train from Kiev to go outside to the border. But if you remember pictures, and it was true, thousands of people on a platform waiting for a new train. Nobody knows the direction of this train. And I realized that this way is impossible for me, because even if one of my children would like to go, for example, for toilet, we should leave the place and start from the beginning. And there are 6 of us. I was afraid to lose somebody in these crowds. And I realized that this is not our way. Absolutely. Another option was to leave by car. We have 7 seats in a car, and it was physically possible to execute, but Ukraine is big enough. And to get to the border, it's 700 kilometers. And it means that it's not enough one ballon of gasoline in my car to get there. And then the war started, a gas station were empty. It means that I could appear somewhere in the middle of nowhere with 4 children and with my mother. What can I do with this? Nothing. So it's also wasn't a way for us. That's why I decided that we will stay home till I find a way to get out. And the solution came from Facebook. I saw an announcement that Jewish agency arranges buses to the border, to Moldova, to Poland at that time. And it is possible to get out with them. And I realized that this is our chance, because it's, I will not drive a car. I understand that this wave will be organized as it could at that time. And it was a solution. I just wanted to be sure that we will have a place in this bus, because we didn't live in Kiev at that moment. We had to get to Kiev, and the bridge to Kiev was bombed already. So it was destroyed, and I had to make a long way around to get to Kiev to bring my family there. So it was really a big challenge, but everything was decided for one day.
Let me ask you, how are your children doing now? I mean, that whole process, my mommy's physically going through a horrible suffering experience of cancer and the treatments. Their grandmother has been through an embolism, a brain bleed. There's a war going on. Now we've got to pick up what little we're allowed to pick up and travel, and may never see this place again. How did they handle it then? How are they handling it now?
At the moment we sat in a bus, I said them that let's consider this as a trip. And we started to joke that, Mom, you promised us to bring us to Israel, and you always told that it is not realistic because we have different age and different interests, and it's difficult for you to combine us together to this trip. And now you do this. And they really were kidding the whole time from me. And I was happy that they consider this from this standpoint. And it was very impressive for me that the whole way they were asking me about Israel.
Oh.
The whole way they were talking. It's normal for small children, but the oldest teenagers, they not, you wish them to talk with you, but normally they do not. And in this case, I enjoyed to be with them, because the whole day we discussed Israel, what is here, what is what we expect, what should we do. So it was I tried to do this, and we really tried to enjoy this trip, to be optimistic. So because then we put a question, if we come back home, I had to be honest with them. I didn't know this. And even now I explain them that I can't promise that we will come back. The only thing I tell them that thanks to Israel, we are allowed to stay here. We are safety, we receive help, and we have to do our best to integrate the society. This is our target.
Well, tell me, what role did the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews do? Where were they in this for you?
The first time I paid attention on the fellowship, it was after my meeting with the council in Moldova, because he said me, now you have to go this way. These guys will help you to fly to Israel. And I remember when I came, I said, I received a citizenship visa, or how it is called, I don't know, for me and for my children. But they still have to check my mother. She will go to Israel as a tourist. How can we fly together? Because they explained me that I am not able to pay for the ticket. I said, I will not go alone, we should go all together. And I remember one man, he just fulfilled some form, and he said, wow, you have for children? I said, yes, you're welcome. You're coming with the best valuable thing.
Oh, wow.
You're welcome. I said, I have one problem. I need to come with my mom. She said, give me a minute. I don't know who was he, frankly speaking, what is his name. I was so grateful to him, because when he came, he said, I solved the problem. You're flying together, and you even shouldn't pay for this.
Wow. That's everything. And let me tell you, there's so many Christians in the United States. In fact, I pastor a congregation, and for many years, we give thousands of dollars every month just to Aliyah. That's our primary objective, prophetically, to be a part of what God is doing through in the nation of Israel, through the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And you are one of the most wonderful stories and testimonies of what God has done through the fellowship. Irina, I cannot thank you enough. I just pray now that the blessing of the Lord will be upon you, your precious mother, those 4 children in this time of transition, that like Israel itself, each one of you will blossom and bloom in that precious land. And we just give God thanks for it and for you. God bless you, Irina. Thank you for your time. You're amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.